True freedom does not arise from the world around us, but from the courage to see reality as it is, and to choose, with clarity and discipline, who we decide to be in front of it. Look again, not with hurried eyes that scan the surface, but with the attention of someone who suspects something is out of place in the painting, an uncomfortable detail, a noise beneath the silence. Have you ever noticed how certain wealthy men wear shirts that look like they were bought on sale, as if they've forgotten they're rich? Have you noticed the simple watch, the worn sneakers, the modest car parked far from the entrance, the restrained way of ordering coffee at a random counter? This isn't pure virtue, it's not spontaneous humility. It's calculation, it's protection against eyes that measure, weigh, and covet. It's the art of walking downtown without carrying a target on your back. Their simplicity is a curtain that opens and closes as the scene demands, and that's why it hurts to admit what comes next. When the poor imitate this simplicity, they don't protect themselves, they disappear. Do you see the difference? First impressions are a defenseless verdict. The room decides who matters before the first sentence. It's cruel, but it's true. The body arrives, the eyes assess, the mind classifies. There's what smells like a command, and there's what smells like an apology. The core of this law isn't in the clothing label, but in what presence communicates. Those with substance can be silent. Those without it need to send a signal. When a rich person wears an old pair of sneakers, they display the freedom of those who can do anything and choose less. When a poor person wears the same sneakers, they confirm the label the world already wanted to affix. The same object, two meanings. The same gesture, two interpretations. It's unfair, it's human. Think of that man who arrives at the contract meeting in an old suit. His posture is strong, his mind is direct. His argument is solid. None of this penetrates the invisible filter that defines who speaks and who listens. The flimsy fabric of his jacket becomes a metaphor for fragile ideas, even when they aren't. Someone whispers, "We'll see later," and that "later" is a sentence. Elsewhere, a woman speaks on the sidewalk about a project that could change many people's lives. She speaks with conviction, but her hands tremble from the cold. Her blouse doesn't fit well. Time is running out. The street doesn't give her credit. What's at stake isn't charity, it's hierarchy. Those who appear to have power are listened to. Those who appear to need it are rushed. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt the truth die not for lack of substance, but for lack of packaging? Some people mistake this reading for an invitation to vanity. It's not. It's a warning about signals. The city operates on shortcuts. People make dozens of micro-judgments per minute to avoid going crazy with so much information. No one opens a dossier on you in the elevator. They look, decode, move on. If your signal is weak, you're relegated to the back of the shelf. If your signal is strong, you get the spotlight. This happens at work, in relationships, in lines, in negotiations. The question that haunts you, often without you realizing it, is simple and brutal. Is it worth my attention? If your set of signals answers maybe, or later, you lose without a fight. The elite understands this language. Therefore, they practice contrast and modulate their volume. There are days when showing power attracts attack. On those days, they choose the shadow. There are times when the shadow seems weak. On those times, they raise their voice. Their simplicity is a calibration tool, not penance. It isn't born of lack, it's born of controlled excess. They can open the vault of prestige at any moment. They can pull from their sleeve a signature, a name, a reference that seals a room. Life has treated them as exceptions long enough for a minimal gesture to be worth a speech. When they sit in an ordinary cafe, they still own the building next door. The cup is just a backdrop. Now turn the mirror around. Those still climbing the ladder don't have the luxury of disappearing. Silence becomes absence. Discretion becomes shadow. Sloppy clothing confirms a label already haunting you. You can be competent, detail-oriented, brilliant. If you arrive without a signal, the system pushes you to the periphery of the map. This doesn't mean spending what you don't have or pretending to be a plastic fortune. It means building a clean, legible, unmistakable presence. It means image ergonomics, the essentials, well kept without noise. It means polishing the first reading so that the content shines through. One might argue that the world should value essence. I agree, but essence needs a medium to travel. A brilliant idea dies if the channel carrying it is short. You don't send wine through a cracked pipe. Coherence between message and container isn't a fad, it's attention engineering. Look back and count how many opportunities you missed without knowing they were opportunities. The job opening that didn't call, the invitation that didn't come, the partnership that didn't respond. And how many of those instances was your signal already interpreted as not urgent before the first hello? Perhaps someone taught you that modesty is always noble. Perhaps you confused discretion with obscurity. They're not the same thing. Discretion is when you choose the focus. Obscurity is when the focus chooses you out. Discretion is power without fanfare. Obscurity is absence without return. The line between the two isn't metaphysical. It's visible. It's in the hem of the pants, the shine on the shoes, the posture of the body, the rhythm of the speech, the gaze that holds or yields. These are details that communicate governance. And governance in the eyes of the world is a sign that you can take responsibility. Those who govern themselves create the inference that they can govern more. The question then becomes, how to produce presence without falling into caricature? The answer begins with form. Form doesn't compete with content. Form enables content. The cut that fits well, the fabric that doesn't wrinkle, the color that doesn't scream, the impeccable cleanliness, the watch that doesn't try to tell a story its name can't yet support. You don't need to look rich. You need to look sober. You need to seem inevitable. Words do the rest, but only if they arrive after a frame that invites us to hear them. What if I'm judged for investing in my appearance? You're already being judged. The difference is why. You can be judged for self-neglect or for intention. Both are judgments. Only one of them opens doors. If appearance becomes empty theater, the world notices. If appearance is consistent with real discipline, punctuality, preparation, clarity, dedication, then appearance ceases to be a mask and becomes a signature. It is at this point that modesty regains its place, as a chosen gesture, not an excuse for not having chosen anything. Think about the invisible rituals that precede a good first impression. Arriving 5 minutes early without an air of urgency, entering the room with steps that don't ask permission or challenge the space, just take it over. Greeting by looking someone in the eye long enough to make an impression and short enough not to invade. Speaking after taking a breath, not to fill the silence, but to direct attention. Listening more than interrupting, not promising what you can't deliver. Delivering a little more than you promised. This sequence, repeated, creates a field, and fields attract. When a quatrain sets in, the outfit ceases to be a theme and becomes a complement. The opposite is also true. Without a field, the outfit becomes a theme and traps you in the stereotype of empty effort. There's a temptation to believe that a just world would dispense with this engineering. But the current world is made of time constraints, cognitive fatigue, and mental shortcuts. Those who ignore this experience are behind the times. Those who learn to operate in this realm increase their chances of merit being recognized. Yes, merit needs to be recognized. Merit isn't a candle lit in a basement waiting for someone to come downstairs. Merit is a light on the main path. You light it, and you also direct it. At this point, the uncomfortable question arises. If I intensify my signal, won't I attract more criticism? Yes. A strong signal produces friction. Friction is the price of visibility. But there's one fact that might reassure you. Those who criticize based on form, criticize anyway. The right criticism, the one that matters, will come from the content. And with it, you learn, improve, and grow. The other criticism, the one that only wanted to keep you down, dissolves when you realize there's no guilt in presenting yourself with dignity. The same dignity you would demand from those who represent what you respect most. There's also the comfortable narrative that someday they'll notice. Someday. Who decides that day? Who schedules that audition? Who gives you advance notice? Everyday life isn't a talent show. It's a noisy marketplace. For someone to try your fruit, it needs to be visible, clean, and well-placed. Not because the fruit needs to be a lie, but because the show needs to be legible. You can hate this logic. It will continue to operate. Or you can master it until the system itself invites you to play by different rules. The irony is that when that invitation arrives, you gain the freedom to wear your worn-out sweatshirt in the middle of the afternoon. The difference is that then, no one mistakes you for irrelevant. The practice of presence begins in the mirror, but it doesn't end there. Space, voice, time, three resources that define command. Space is the perimeter you occupy without asking permission. Not too much, not too little. Voice is the vibration that organizes the air. It doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be firm. Tempo is the rhythm you impose on the conversation. Whoever controls the tempo controls the meaning. Do you notice the difference between speaking quickly to justify yourself and speaking slowly to structure? Between launching into 10 insecure sentences and offering one sentence that leads the others? These are the markers that other people's brains read before reaching the content. You can train. Training takes the topic out of the mystical realm. Choose a piece that fits you as if it were made for you. Not the most expensive, the most honest. Treat your shoes as if they were your extended resume. Carry less than you think you need and more confidence than you usually do. Carry a notebook that sticks with you. Write legibly. Say good morning in its entirety. Don't underestimate the power of a thank you said face to face, not over your shoulder. If you commit, follow through. If you can't follow through, let us know in advance. This circuit builds reputation, and reputation is a discreet megaphone. It opens doors when you're still 2 hallways away, because someone whispers, "Let me in, it's worth it." You can also adjust your environment, the desk you work at, the background image on your calls, the order of your backpack, the status of your cell phone. Everything communicates, not out of aesthetic neurosis, but as a sign of internal management. The same goes for the energy you bring. There's a magnetism in those who don't arrive apologizing for existing. It's not arrogance, it's centrality. The phrase subtly changes from "sorry to bother you" to "thank you for the space." It seems like a detail. It's not. The world responds to micro variations in posture like a seismograph. You might wonder if this isn't performing something you're not yet. Use a simple distinction. Deceiving and anticipating are different verbs. Deceiving is promising flight without wings. Anticipating is adjusting your body posture for the jump you're practicing. Your presence can be one step ahead of your results without becoming a fraud, as long as your results follow suit. This is how careers are built. The opposite, expecting results alone to set the stage, usually ends with exhausted talents in empty hallways. There's also the fear of others' gaze. They'll think I'm boasting. Some do. The other person's moral filter isn't your jurisdiction. Your jurisdiction is the consistency between what you say, what you do, and what your signal announces. If these 3 things are aligned, the noise becomes background, and the background, by definition, doesn't command. What commands is the melodic line. If you don't offer it, someone else does it for you, and you become a backing arrangement in someone else's song. In the end, the question boils down to a decision that's less aesthetic than ethical. Will you accept being read as chance, or will you choose to be read as intention? Intention isn't shouting. Intention is not fading away. It's recognizing that, in a world that selects for visibility, remaining in the dark isn't a virtue, it's abdication. You don't need to compete for shine with those born in the spotlight. You need to shine brightly enough so that your ideas don't die before they're even born. You need to shine brightly enough so that, when you lower your head to work, your presence continues to operate silently in your favor, like a lighthouse that never blinks. So, look again at those who seem unassuming at the top. They don't deny the stage. They control the light. They know when to enter and when to disappear. They know that dressing scantily is sometimes a way to walk quickly, to pass through doors without alarm. They know, most importantly, that this only works because they've already left enough clues about who they are. They can leave, and the room continues to speak their name. You're still writing your own name on the edge of the table. This isn't the time to leave. It's the time to sit up straight, straighten your collar, maintain your gaze, and say what needs to be said at the cadence of someone who occupies their proper place. If all this sounds harsh, it's because the world doesn't send handwritten invitations. It tests. It tests with eyes. It tests with forgetfulness. It tests with half-open doors. Every test asks the same thing. Do you want to be seen? If the answer is yes, it needs to appear before the question. This is how the game is won before the first move. And that's why, when you see someone rich in simple clothing, avoid the lazy conclusion that simplicity produces success. It doesn't. Simplicity only doesn't prevent success from appearing when success is already greater than the clothing. Until then, dress with clarity, dress with self-respect, dress with purpose. Now keep this metaphorical. Presence doesn't replace competence, but without presence, competence becomes a low noise on a busy street. You might call it injustice. I call it context. Context isn't the judge, it's grammar. And grammar isn't convinced by whining. It's mastered by practice. It's this mastery that separates those who walk through the glass door from those who slam their face and walk back 2 blocks. You decide which side you're on. Breathe. Look again. The question that remains, and which will accompany you when you get up from your chair, is direct and demands a practical answer. From today on, what signal will you deliberately emit so that your voice carries unbroken to the next room? Don't answer now. Carry the question with you. It is the final beat of this part and the first step of what comes next. ChatGPT said, imagine the scene. A man walks into a meeting room. He spent all night preparing a project, reviewing numbers, testing hypotheses, and creating graphs. His heart pounds with the confidence of someone who knows he has something solid in his hands. But before he opens his mouth, before the first slide flashes on the screen, judgment is already being made. The suit he wears has old creases. His watch bears the scratches of time. His shoes have lost their shine. None of this compromises his intelligence, but it does compromise how the world sees him. Eyes meet, whispers escape, and before he realizes it, he's already been cataloged in the irrelevant drawer. What he says next doesn't matter. The minds of others have already closed. The truth he carries doesn't penetrate because the packaging has failed. This is how doors close silently, leaving only the echo of frustration. Now consider another scene. A woman stands on the street, holding a folder filled with ideas that could transform lives. Her voice trembles, not because she doesn't know what she's saying, but because her body carries the tension of years of being ignored. Her baggy clothes, her hastily tied hair, her weary expression, all conspire against her message. What she says is true, urgent, necessary, but the crowd doesn't listen. Some laugh, others look away, most pass by indifferently. They call her crazy, not because her words are insane, but because her image doesn't carry authority. The same sentence uttered by someone on stage, under the spotlight, would draw applause. But there, on the cold concrete, it only elicits disregard. This is the invisible weight of appearance, transforming genius into noise, conviction into delirium, urgency into irrelevance. And think of the worker, with his calloused hands and stained shirt. He sees the machine jam and finds the solution in seconds. The manager, dressed in a tie and covered in titles, notices nothing. But who gets the credit? The manager. The worker remains invisible. His intelligence is swallowed by the dust on his clothes. No one asks, no one notes, no one thanks him. The problem is solved, but the merit evaporates. And life goes on with him stuck in the same position, not for lack of value, but because the image he projects hides the power he wields. It's cruel, but it happens every day. The world doesn't see essence first. The world sees signs. We are evaluated by eyes that don't ask for permission, that scan in seconds, that define without the right to defend ourselves. It's an automatic, merciless judgment, based on quick clues. Those who seem to have control are listened to. Those who seem to apologize for existing are pushed into silence. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that no matter how prepared you were, no one paid attention? Have you ever found yourself repeating ideas that others stole, just because when you spoke, no one listened? Have you ever felt the indignation of being ignored not for what you said, but for what you seemed to say? What they call humility is actually a filter. The rich can afford to dress simply because they carry a history that speaks for themselves. Their bank account, their surname, their network of contacts, their accumulated reputation, all of this acts as an invisible megaphone. They can walk around in sandals and still be respected. When they open their mouths, the world listens not for what they see, but for what they know is behind it. The poor, in trying to imitate the same simplicity, don't convey freedom, they convey absence. They don't signal strength, they signal lack. The same sandals that on the rich signify authenticity, on the poor signify carelessness. Is it unfair? Yes. But that's how the human mind works. It interprets context before interpreting content. This is where many get lost. They believe that being humble is enough to be respected. They believe that simply showing humility is enough for the world to recognize virtue. But humility without foundation is invisibility. When you haven't achieved anything yet, you can't hide behind silence or clothes that minimize who you are. This doesn't generate respect. It generates indifference. And indifference is worse than criticism. Those who criticize you have at least seen you. Those who ignore you have already erased you. Look at everyday life and realize The candidate who arrives at an interview dressed disheveledly, even if talented, is rarely chosen. The customer who enters a store looking unkempt is often poorly served, even if they have money to spend. The student who speaks with conviction but carries shyness in their gestures is seen as insecure, even if they have better answers than everyone else. These are automatic judgments made in milliseconds, but they decide entire destinies. You may not think so, but with every glance, every room, every encounter, your image is defining whether you will be heard or forgotten. And the most dangerous thing is that, over time, you internalize this invisibility. You start to believe you don't deserve to be noticed, that it doesn't matter whether you speak or remain silent, because no one will listen anyway. This is how brilliant minds shrink. This is how dreams die before they're even born, not for lack of talent, but for lack of presence. The presence that should have been cultivated, but was sacrificed in the name of misinterpreted humility. A humility that doesn't protect, only erases. The world isn't fair, but it is predictable. It operates on codes. It reacts to signals. You don't control anyone's mind, but you can control the signals you send. You can decide whether your clothing communicates disorder or discipline. You can decide whether your posture shows weakness or command. You can decide whether your voice apologizes or demands respect. And these choices, repeated every day, create a field of perception around you. A field that opens doors before you even knock, or closes them silently without warning, without return. And this is where the narrative shifts, because there's a paradox few realize. The poor believe that fading away is protection, that dressing in simplicity is virtue, that remaining silent is prudence, but all of this only accelerates their disappearance. It's like trying to hide from the storm by burying yourself in the sand. You don't protect yourself, you bury yourself. The rich, on the other hand, can use the same sand as a disguise, because when they decide to stand up, everyone already knows who they are. The poor, if they stand up, no one notices. Disguise doesn't protect, it consumes. This is the silent brutality of social life. Those who arrive weak and appear inferior are treated as irrelevant. Those who arrive weak but appear superior force others to adjust their interpretation. You've seen this. You've seen someone enter a room without many resources, but with such presence that the entire room turned. It wasn't wealth, it was command. It was discipline. It was a clear sign that there was someone there who wouldn't accept being erased. And the room listened. The room always listens when the signals are strong enough to cut through the mental shortcuts. But how many people do you know who had talent but never learned to send a signal? How many were forgotten in mediocre jobs, toxic relationships, and colorless lives simply because they believed someone would notice? That day never came, and it never will. The world doesn't reward silence. The world rewards presence, and those who don't understand this die invisible, carrying within themselves what was never seen. So when you look at your routine, notice the details that already give away your position. The wrinkled shirt, the worn shoes, the look that wanders away, the tone that asks permission to speak. All of this creates a portrait, and this portrait is read in seconds by whoever might open or close the next door. You may fool yourself into thinking it doesn't matter, but it already does. You are already being judged right now, in this moment, by the signals you send out without realizing it. And the question remains, how long will you accept being seen as invisible? How long will you repeat the mistake of believing that humility without power is a virtue, when in fact it is condemnation? The world will not change the way it works. Shortcuts will continue to exist. The difference is whether you will learn to use them or whether you will fall victim to them. Because the man who arrives prepared but poorly dressed may continue to be ignored. The woman who speaks the truth but trembles may continue to be ridiculed. The worker who solves problems may continue to be invisible. But you don't have to be next. The choice is yours. And the choice must begin now, before it's too late. This is the hallmark of this section. The realization that judgment doesn't wait, doesn't negotiate, doesn't warn. It happens in seconds. And every second you don't control the image, someone else has already decided your place for you. Silence of the world isn't neutral. It's a sentence. And those who don't understand this will continue to ask the same unanswered question. Why doesn't anyone see me? They always said that humility is the greatest of virtues. We grew up hearing that we should lower our heads, speak little, dress simply, and accept circumstances without complaint. But no one told the uncomfortable truth. Humility is only respected when born of choice, never of lack. When someone powerful chooses to remain silent, their silence is read as wisdom. When someone weak remains silent out of fear, their silence is read as weakness. The same attitude, two opposite interpretations. The rich can hide behind simple clothes because beneath them lies a wall of influence. The poor, by doing the same, disappear. The modesty that seemed like a virtue turns into poison. Have you ever wondered how many times you've confused submission with prudence? The difference lies in the origin. A billionaire who appears in public in flip-flops doesn't lose value. The world interprets him as eccentric, as someone who has transcended appearances. But when a man without prestige enters an office wearing the same outfit, the reading is brutal, lazy, sloppy, unprepared. The outfit is identical, but the context changes everything. Power is an invisible translator that redefines signals, and it is this translator that separates respect from contempt, authority from insignificance. If you don't yet have accumulated power, you can't don the mask of humility without it becoming a shackle. What seems like a strategy at the top is a sentence at the bottom. Why doesn't anyone explain this? Because it's in the interest of keeping the majority believing that erasing oneself is noble, when in fact, it's a sure path to irrelevance. Consider the weight of this distortion. How many brilliant people have you known who chose to be discreet, wear simple clothes, and not attract attention? They believed they were demonstrating wisdom, but the world only saw weakness. How many talents were buried by the belief that those who are good appear alone? No one appears alone. Someone decides who will be seen, and that decision is made based on signals. Silence, simplicity, and modesty only work as protection when you already have something that resonates in your name. Before that, they are just layers of dust that hide your brilliance. Have you ever noticed how this logic has shaped your life without you even realizing it? The great secret is that the rich use modesty as a weapon. It's theater. They can afford to appear small because they're already great. Invisibility for them isn't a risk, it's a resource. It confuses enemies, reduces envy, and disarms adversaries. But for those who have achieved nothing, being invisible is like burying themselves alive. When you decide to dress the same way, keep your silence the same way, walk in the shadows the same way, you're not copying a strategy, you're signing your own sentence. Why is it that virtues are so often talked about as if they were universal, when in fact they depend on context, power, and choice? Here's how it works. The rich choose when to speak and when to remain silent. If they remain silent, everyone assumes they know something others don't. If they speak little, each word carries weight. But when the poor remain silent, no one asks why. They assume they have nothing to say. The silence of the powerful is mysterious. The silence of the weak is irrelevant. The difference isn't in the sound, it's in what comes behind it. This isn't a detail, it's the key that decides destinies. Have you ever mistaken your shyness for virtue, when in fact it was just fear? Forced modesty is an invisible prison. One believes one is protected from attacks, but is only protected from being noticed, and not being noticed is worse than being criticized. Hatred keeps you on the radar. Indifference erases your existence. How many brilliant names have disappeared not because they failed, but because no one even saw them try? The world doesn't forgive those who hide too soon. What appears to be prudence is, in practice, cowardice disguised as wisdom. Have you ever wondered if your life would be different today if you had decided to show up, even imperfectly, instead of waiting for the ideal moment that never arrives? Life isn't fair, but it is predictable. It follows patterns that repeat before our eyes. Those who learn to show themselves before they become great gain ground. Those who try to hide before they conquer become shadows. The rich can refuse an invitation and still be remembered. The poor, if they refuse, are forgotten forever. The rich can wear simple clothes and remain respected. The poor wear the same clothes and disappear. It's not about fashion, it's about signs of authority. It's cruel, but denial changes nothing. Why then do so many insist on following the path that leads to erasure? The answer is uncomfortable. Because we've been trained to believe that humility is always a virtue. School repeats it, religion reinforces it, family applauds it. From an early age, we're told that showing off is arrogance, that remaining silent is wisdom, that dressing simply is a sign of character. But no one explains that these virtues are only recognized when there's already power behind them. Before that, they're just excuses to keep you small. It's a pedagogy of submission. Have you noticed how this upbringing shaped your posture, your clothes, your speech, your gestures? And then comes the unexpected twist. The problem isn't being simple, but when to be simple. The rich man understood the sequence. First he conquers, then he disappears. First he builds his presence, then he decides to disguise himself. The poor man tries to reverse the order. He disappears before being seen, he disguises himself before being noticed. And in this inversion, what should be protection becomes a curse. It's not the gesture that condemns, it's the timing. Have you ever considered that perhaps it's not your competence that's lacking, but your courage to show yourself at the right time? Imagine a Roman emperor walking through the city in a simple tunic. The people applaud him, call him wise, and venerate him for his closeness to the common people. What the people don't see is the hidden army, the network of spies, the allies in the palace corridors. The tunic isn't humility, it's strategy. Now imagine a peasant in the same tunic. No one applauds him, no one calls him wise. He's just another face lost in the crowd. The clothing is identical, but the interpretation is opposite. Which of the two do you think is closer to you today? The irony is that simplicity, so often sold as a universal virtue, is one of the most selective tools in existence. It only works for those who have already won. Those who use it too soon lose. Those who use it after victory win twice, first through power, then through the image of virtue. The myth is dangerous because it teaches the poor to imitate the rich backward, and in this inversion, the poor disappear. Isn't it strange that the very thing they claim to be noble is what keeps you most grounded? How many leaders have been called visionaries for speaking little, when in fact they simply let others speak for them? And how many workers have been called apathetic for the same silence? How many millionaires have been called wise for wearing simple clothing, when in fact it was just a protective strategy? And how many poor people have been called slovenly for the same gesture? Do you see how the same action carries completely different weight depending on who performs it? The crucial point is that humility without power has no positive interpretation. It's absence, it's silence interpreted as emptiness, it's simplicity interpreted as weakness. Humility only gains respect when it's a voluntary choice, never when it's the only option. That's why the rich man appears wise in simple clothes, because he could wear gold but chooses not to. The poor man, by wearing the same, doesn't choose. It's what he has, and the world doesn't respect the inevitable. Have you noticed how this difference in choice defines the entire narrative? This revelation is uncomfortable because it dismantles one of the pillars that sustains the lives of millions. Workers believe they will be respected for not showing off. Students believe they will be valued for keeping quiet and listening. Citizens believe they will be seen as virtuous for refusing to show off what they have. But respect doesn't come. What comes is invisibility. Invisibility so thick it suffocates. And the more a person clings to the idea of humility, the more irrelevant they become. Have you noticed this cycle in your own life? The rich exploit this myth masterfully. They preach simplicity in interviews, while their real lives are complex, planned, and protected. They recommend discretion to others, while using their own discretion as a weapon of domination. It's a double game, and those who believe this rhetoric become its hostages. The more you imitate, the more you disappear. Isn't it contradictory that the same people who talk about modesty are the ones who live in luxury behind the scenes? And here arises the inevitable suspense. If humility is a trap for those who do not yet have power, what should be the path? The answer is not ostentation, not shouting louder, not dressing in luxury without being able to sustain it. The answer is presence. Firm, clear, intentional presence. The visible discipline that conveys command. The care with the signals that tell your story even before the first word. It's not about feigning wealth, it's about demonstrating order. Because those who seem to govern themselves seem capable of governing more. And those who seem incapable of governing themselves are not put in charge of anything. Have you ever considered that perhaps you don't need immediate wealth, but signs of authority now? In the end, the humility trap is the greatest of ironies. Sold as a path to respect, it becomes a path to oblivion. Sold as protection, it becomes a sentence. Sold as virtue, it becomes a prison. While you believe this, those who have already won continue to be applauded for repeating the gesture that makes you laugh. The question that inevitably resonates is simple. How long will you wear the guise of someone who has already won? if you haven't even been seen yet. Imagine walking into a room full of important people, those who can decide the course of a project, a career, or even an entire life. Before you open your mouth, you've already been judged, not for your ideas nor for your ability, but for what other eyes captured in seconds. The way you entered, the outfit you chose, the energy you transmitted without saying a word. It's in that instant that the game is decided. What many don't realize is that invisibility has a high cost, a cost you pay without even realizing it. With every encounter you go unnoticed, every meeting where your words don't resonate, every opportunity where your name isn't remembered, you lose ground that will never be regained. And the cruelest thing is that this happens silently, without warning, without you being able to count the doors that have closed without you knowing they were open. The world doesn't operate according to the logic of justice, but according to the logic of attention. Those who aren't seen don't exist. Those who aren't heard don't matter. And when you disappear too soon, believing that humility and modesty will protect you, you discover too late that silence doesn't generate respect, it generates oblivion. There's no applause for those who never showed up. There's no remembrance for those who always remained in the background. It's at this point that so many lives are lost, not through actual failure, but through absence of presence. Erasure isn't neutral, it's active. It shapes how the world treats you. Every time you dress as if you don't want to be noticed, lower your eyes when you should be looking up, choose a low tone when you should be speaking loudly, you reaffirm your position as invisible. And invisibility, contrary to what many think, isn't security. It's a slow death. The paradox is that we live surrounded by stories of people who shone, but no one tells the stories of those who were never seen. It's like a city built on ghosts. Thousands of talents, ideas, and possibilities buried, because their owners believed in the myth of humility before their time. There are engineers who never emerged from obscurity because they entered rooms silently. There are artists who were never discovered because they were embarrassed to show their work. There are workers who could lead teams, but convinced themselves that speaking less was a virtue. These names don't appear in books, biographies, or documentaries, but they are the invisible mass that sustains the myth. And if you look closely, you might realize that you're just a few steps away from becoming one of them. Interestingly, even science confirms this perverse game. Social psychology research shows that first impressions are formed in fractions of a second, before any rational data is processed. The human mind instinctively classifies faces, postures, and visual cues, deciding whether someone is trustworthy, competent, or irrelevant before the first word is spoken. This mental shortcut was useful in prehistoric times, when quickly identifying an ally or enemy could mean survival. Today, it's the filter that determines whether you'll be promoted, listened to, or ignored. Other people's brains don't wait for you to explain yourself. They judge, file, and move on. Doesn't it seem unlikely that, deep down, we are still hunters and prey, only in offices, streets, and cafes? Accounts from executives reveal almost unbelievable situations. A millionaire investor said he decided to reject a proposal not because the project was bad, but because the entrepreneur seemed insecure when presenting it. Later, he discovered the idea was solid and that another company, with more presence, had made millions with the same concept. In another case, a talented scientist lost funding because she dressed sloppily at events, giving the impression of disorganization. No matter how impeccable her data was, the signal she transmitted contaminated the reading. And these examples are not exceptions. They are the hidden rule. The world is constantly testing its packaging before tasting its contents. How many times have you been rejected without knowing why? Unlikely stories also reveal the other side. There are cases of ordinary people who decided to change small details and saw their perception magically shift. A man who started wearing more formal, albeit simple clothes, began to be treated as someone on the rise. A woman who learned to hold her gaze during meetings saw her ideas finally recognized. A young man who stopped filling the silence with nervous words and began speaking slowly earned immediate respect. None of them became more intelligent or talented overnight. They simply adjusted their signals, and signals are decoded before the essence. It seems unfair, but that's exactly where the chance to turn the tide lies. It's frightening to think that so many vital decisions are made based on such subtle criteria. But this is the reality. Presence is measured before competence. That's why some, even mediocre people rise quickly, while others, brilliant, remain stuck at the bottom. What changes isn't the content, it's the way they present themselves. It's not about empty ostentation, but about visible discipline. It's not about appearing rich, it's about appearing in command. The world responds to those who convey order, clarity, and conviction. Have you ever noticed how even among the poor there is a hierarchy, and those who dress carefully and carry themselves firmly are treated with more respect than the rest? Invisibility has another hidden price. It steals memory. When you disappear in an important situation, your name doesn't come up again later. Those who were present remember the memorable ones, not the hidden ones. Collective memory is selective. It records powerful images and erases shadows. And once erased, it's difficult to reclaim space. You can try again, but you already carry the weight of having been irrelevant before. It's like trying to rekindle a flame after everyone has declared it dead. Wouldn't it be better to never let that flame be invisible? Even in great stories, the pattern repeats itself. Emperors, leaders, and tycoons were only able to adopt simplicity after building their empires. Steve Jobs wore the same black sweater not because he didn't care about image, but because that sweater was already an image. Mark Zuckerberg wears gray t-shirts because everyone knows who he is before they see the shirt. Warren Buffett lives in a modest home because he's already among the richest men in the world. Their modesty isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of freedom. They can choose to disappear because, even invisible, they remain remembered. Now think about yourself. If you disappeared for a year, who would notice? History shows that even royalty understood this game. Kings and queens of different eras learned that showing off too much attracted revolts, but appearing too poor aroused disdain. The solution has always been to calibrate signals. Calculated sobriety, controlled gestures, measured words. The balance between closeness and mystery. The appearance of humility, hiding armies, treasures, and alliances. It's always theater, but a necessary theater. And when someone without power copies this theater, the result isn't respect, it's oblivion. Have you ever noticed that even in the simplest setting, those who seem to have the most control attract all the attention? Every day you choose to erase yourself, you not only lose visibility, but you teach the world to expect nothing from you. This is the tax of invisibility. You pay with opportunities never seen, with doors that never open, with invitations that never arrive, and you pay in silence without realizing it. This is why so many spend their lives believing they were unlucky, when in fact they were simply invisible. Bad luck isn't bad luck. It's the absence of presence. How many times have you attributed to fate what was merely a reflection of the image you projected? It's time to understand that deep down, invisibility is a choice many make believing it to be a virtue, but one that exacts a devastating price. The world has no patience for discovering your hidden worth. It only invests in what already proves valuable. And showing value isn't arrogance, it's survival. With every room you enter, the test begins. And the test doesn't just assess what you know, but how you present yourself. It's unfair, but it's real. And ignoring it doesn't change anything. It only ensures you continue to pay the price of irrelevance. And perhaps the scariest thing is realizing that, while you try to protect yourself by erasing yourself, others are advancing precisely because they've decided to be seen. They're not afraid of envy. They're not afraid of judgment. They're not afraid of criticism, because they understand that even hate keeps you visible, while indifference erases your existence. Those who are hated are still remembered. Those who are invisible are forgotten. And between being attacked and being ignored, it's always better to be attacked, because attacks can be overcome, but oblivion is permanent. So ask yourself, what's more dangerous? The envy of others or the silence that erases you? It is at this point that the narrative finds its harshest truth. There is no virtue in being invisible. There is no glory in going unnoticed. There is no victory in hiding before winning. The rich can disguise themselves because they have already conquered. The poor, by doing the same, only accelerate their own exclusion. Invisibility is not a protective cloak. It is a social death sentence. And as long as you believe that humility is the path to respect, you will continue to feed the myth that keeps the powerful at the top and the discreet forgotten. The game does not reward premature silence. It rewards presence. And until you understand this, you will continue to walk through rooms that have already decided, before you even speak, that you do not matter. There's a moment when the narrative changes color, when simplicity ceases to be mere appearance and becomes calculated spectacle. The powerful know this. They understand that true influence stems not only from what they possess, but from how the world interprets what they reveal. A king dressed in humble attire is no ordinary man. He's a monarch who chose to appear ordinary. A billionaire in a basic t-shirt is no ordinary citizen. He's someone who could wear any luxury but chose to act the opposite. This game is as old as politics, as subtle as a gesture of silence. The public believes they see authenticity, but what they see is theater. What appears to be virtue is strategy. What appears to be chance is meticulous direction. Have you ever stopped to think how many times your admiration has been manipulated by this silent game? Imagine an important boardroom. The expectation is that leaders enter dressed in expensive clothes, symbols of power on display. But the most influential appears in simple, almost banal attire. The immediate reaction is not contempt, but fascination. If he can dress like that, it's because he's already surpassed the level where he needs to prove something. The collective mind interprets simplicity as superiority, and that's the trick. When you have enough power, every gesture is translated through the filter of accumulated prestige. Even silence becomes authority. Even worn clothing becomes a sign of genius. The same gesture that demeans a powerless man elevates a man who has already conquered. Have you noticed the injustice of this inversion? There are almost unbelievable moments that reveal this mechanism. A major investor arrives at a meeting wearing sandals and is called a visionary. A young job candidate, dressed the same way, is dismissed as lazy. At a lecture, a tycoon speaks for 10 minutes in simple sentences, and everyone writes down every word as if it were timeless wisdom. An employee, with much more solid ideas, speaks for 30 minutes and is ignored. Context transforms simplicity into spectacle. It's not about the sentence, it's about who delivers it. It's not about the attire, it's about the invisible weight of the name. Have you ever reflected on how often the same content has different destinations simply because it comes from different mouths? The powerful understand the art of concealment. They know that showing too much attracts enemies, but showing too little attracts curiosity. That's why they disguise themselves. They feign closeness to the crowd while maintaining distance with invisible walls. They pretend to be equals when in practice they are untouchable. Their simplicity is calculated to be read as genius, never as weakness. And the audience, mesmerized, applauds. The people look at the monarch in plain clothes and say, "He's just like us." But deep down they know he's not. This contrast creates mystery, and mystery breeds respect. Have you ever wondered how many times you've been led to admire someone, not for what they did, but for how they portrayed themselves? Even history confirms this. Emperors wore modest clothing in public rituals to appear close to the people, yet at the same time they paraded surrounded by guards invisible to the crowd. Generals entered battle in plain uniforms to confuse their enemies, but every soldier around knew who they were and obeyed immediately. This combination of outward simplicity and hidden strength is the essence of image manipulation. That's why modern leaders repeat the pattern. The executive who wears the same color every day, the politician who eats at a popular restaurant, the billionaire who drives a plain car. None of them do this by accident. Every detail is thought out for effect. Why do you think so many of these stories are repeated across different eras and cultures? The shock occurs when we try to copy the spectacle without owning the stage. The poor man who dresses simply isn't seen as strategic. He's seen as defeated. The young man who speaks little isn't seen as wise. He's seen as insecure. The woman who hides behind discretion isn't seen as elegant. She's seen as irrelevant. The same gesture that protects the powerful destroys those they haven't yet conquered. This is the cruel twist. Theater only works when you already have an audience. Without an audience, the play isn't art, it's silence. Have you ever realized that by imitating the modesty of the great, you might be staging your own exclusion? Power lies in reversing logic. Instead of hiding prematurely, you need to project presence. The spectacle of simplicity should only be staged when there's already something behind it to support the image. Before that, what the world needs to see is discipline, clarity, and order. Well-kept clothes, firm posture, and a confident voice. Not luxury, but signs of command. Not ostentation, but intentionality. Because those who govern themselves convey the impression they can govern more. Modesty is only respected when it's a choice, never when it's a condition. Have you been living as someone who chooses or as someone who resigns themselves? Tension mounts when you realize how the powerful manipulate even the perception of envy. They know that arousing admiration without generating hatred is impossible, so they use simplicity as a buffer. They show just enough to provoke desire, but hide the excess to avoid becoming easy targets. They publish photos in ordinary places, but negotiate behind luxurious backrooms. They talk about simple lives in interviews, but keep secrets in secure vaults. They understand that the crowd hates the inaccessible, but loves the enigma. Staged simplicity transforms envy into fascination. How many times have you believed you were seeing proximity, when in fact you were watching a trick of social illusionism? Data on human behavior reinforces this pattern. Studies show that the perception of status is so powerful that it even alters the interpretation of facial expressions. The same smile on a face associated with wealth is read as charm, while on a face associated with poverty, it is read as submission. The same silence from an executive is read as confidence, while the silence of a subordinate is read as fear. The human brain filters signals according to the sender's social position. This means that before achieving power, you cannot afford to appear invisible, because invisibility will be interpreted as irrelevance. Have you ever imagined how many times you have been misinterpreted not for what you said, but for the position you occupied? The spectacle of simplicity acts like a smokescreen. While you observe the humble gesture, you fail to notice the power mechanisms working behind the scenes. The executive who drives a basic car has access to private jets when needed. The billionaire who dines at a simple restaurant closes million-dollar deals in private meetings. The politician who appears in ordinary clothes has an army of advisors planning every detail of his image. Nothing is spontaneous. Everything is coordinated. Simplicity is the public face of a hidden complexity. Have you ever considered the possibility that what appears to be a virtue is just another form of control? And this is where the turning point intensifies. The modesty you admire may be the same thing that imprisons you. By believing that simplicity is synonymous with greatness, you internalize the idea that you shouldn't show yourself, shouldn't stand out, shouldn't attract attention. Meanwhile, the powerful use the same concept to reinforce their untouchability. They tell you it's noble to be simple so you can remain small while they grow. It's a subtle but devastating manipulation. Those who believe without question fall into the trap of living invisibly, while others thrive on stage. How many times have you heard that less is more without realizing that for you, less simply means less? In the end, the truth is clear and brutal. The simplicity of the powerful is theater, and theater is sustained by the stage of power already conquered. For them, humility is a mask. For you, it's still a prison. And until you understand this, you will continue playing the role of an extra in the play of your own life. The world doesn't applaud the invisible. It only applauds those who have already gained enough light to fade without disappearing. Until then, presence is an obligation, and every time you mistake simplicity for premature virtue, you fade a little further. The show isn't about clothes, words, or gestures. It's about who you already are before you perform them. And if you haven't yet made a name for yourself, you can't hide behind the curtain, because in the dark, no one remembers you. We've reached the point where all masks have been ripped off, and there's no longer any escaping the truth. You've realized throughout this journey that invisibility isn't protection, that humility without power isn't a virtue, and that simplicity without prestige isn't respect. The world doesn't reward those who hide too soon. It doesn't reward those who fade away in the hope that someone will illuminate them. The world responds to signs, to presence, to the clarity of those who choose to show themselves. And this is where you must make a choice that will change the way you walk from now on. The choice between continuing to live in the shadows, hoping that one day someone will recognize your worth, or accepting from now on that your life can no longer be written in silence. This decision isn't comfortable, it isn't easy, but it's the dividing line between being remembered and being forgotten. You don't need immediate wealth to begin transforming the way the world sees you. You need discipline in detail, intentionality in every gesture, an awareness that every appearance you make is a test of perception. Your clothes don't need to be expensive, but they should be carefully crafted. Your tone of voice doesn't need to be loud, but it does need to be firm. Your gaze doesn't need to intimidate, but it does need to be present. It's small choices, repeated every day, that rewrite how others interpret you. What you wear, the way you walk, the amount of time you let silence fill after a sentence. All of this builds an invisible narrative that precedes any word. It's not about cheap staging, but about taking responsibility for your own image. If you don't control it, others will. It's inevitable that someone will ask, "Isn't this arrogance? Wouldn't it be better to let people discover your essence for themselves?" The answer is straightforward: no, because no one has time to investigate your essence if the signals you convey don't spark interest. The world is fast, impatient, and saturated with stimuli. Every encounter is a filter. Every glance is an instant decision. If you don't emit clear signals of value, you'll be relegated to the disposable shelf before you can even speak. And once placed there, getting out requires 10 times more effort. That's why prevention is always more effective than repair. Showing yourself is responsibility, not arrogance. Hiding is giving up, not humility. The practical path begins by assuming that neutrality doesn't exist. Your every action communicates something. If you enter a room with unsteady steps, you communicate doubt. If you look away, you communicate submission. If you speak too quickly, you communicate anxiety. Likewise, if you enter erect and calm, you communicate command. If you hold your gaze, you communicate firmness. If you speak slowly, you communicate clarity. It's impossible not to transmit signals. The difference lies in deciding whether these signals will be conscious or accidental. From now on, every gesture needs to be a choice, not an accident. You can start by practicing what seems banal: the handshake, your posture at a table, the care with your clothes, the cleanliness of your shoes, the way you greet. These small details aren't cosmetic. They are the basis of the impression that determines whether people will listen to you or not. It's also essential to practice using your voice. Not the voice in the technical sense, but the energy it carries. When you speak, what you convey is more important than the words themselves. If your voice conveys uncertainty, no one will remember the message. If it conveys conviction, even simple sentences become memorable. Have you ever noticed that many people considered great speakers don't say anything complex? The power lies in the cadence, the pause, the firmness. This is how you transform a common phrase into an inescapable sentence. Practice silences. Practice pauses. Practice looking before speaking. Each of these moments generates tension, and tension generates respect. The next step is to understand that presence isn't just about appearance. Presence is also energy. When you enter a place, you bring with you an invisible field. This field can be of haste, anxiety, or guilt, and then everyone senses it and treats it accordingly. Or it can be of calm, clarity, or centeredness, and then everyone adjusts their own rhythm to yours. You need to learn to govern your field. This requires mental discipline, breath control, and body awareness. It's not just what you wear or what you say, it's what you convey, even in silence. A leader's strength lies not only in their words, but in the sensation their presence evokes. What has your presence evoked so far? Another essential practice is to deliberately choose where and how to be seen. Not all exposure is good. You don't need to shout it to the whole world. You need to appear in the right contexts, where your image connects with what you want to build. This means being intentional on social media, in meetings, and in the workplace. Every post, every photo, every sentence is a narrative construction. If you appear sloppy online, you reinforce the label of irrelevance. If you appear disciplined, you reinforce authority. Modern life no longer separates the physical from the virtual. Everything is part of the same set of signals. Therefore, every detail needs to be consistent. Presence must be a straight line that runs through all spaces. Don't expect the world to interpret your simplicity as a virtue. Expect the world to interpret it as weakness, until you've achieved so much that no one can ignore your greatness. Only then can you choose to fade away without disappearing. Until then, the only option is to show up. Show discipline, show clarity, show intention. Don't flaunt, but don't hide. Don't beg, but don't be silent. Presence is what transforms potential into results, and the price of not applying it is becoming another ghost walking among the living, waiting for recognition that will never come. There comes a time when you need to look in the mirror and ask, what do I want people to feel when I walk into a room? Do I want them to ignore me? Do I want them to treat me like just another person? Do I want them to see me as insecure? Or do I want them to feel weight, respect, authority? The answer to this question will guide your choices, because everything starts with the reflection. If you believe you don't matter, you will convey insignificance. If you believe you matter, you will convey presence. The world copies your own belief and returns it in the form of treatment. This is why so many people live trapped in cycles, believing they are invisible, acting invisible, being treated as invisible. You need to break this cycle now. Transformation won't happen overnight, but it will begin the moment you decide to stop hiding. Every time you show yourself a little more, every time you raise your voice a little more firmly, every time you align your signals, you're reprogramming how the world responds. It's not about pretending, it's about anticipating. It's about acting like someone who already knows they're going to win before others see it. This is the secret that separates those who conquer from those who wait to be discovered. Don't wait. Show yourself. And remember, the world has no memory for those who never introduce themselves. It only remembers those who left their mark, who occupied space, who chose to be seen. Don't allow your story to be lost because you believed in a comfortable myth. Don't accept being forgotten because you mistook humility for invisibility. Don't convince yourself that you will be remembered only for what you carry in your heart. You will only be remembered if you make your presence felt. This is the reality. Harsh but liberating. Now the choice is yours. Continue hiding and pay the price of irrelevance, or stand up and begin constructing signals of authority in every gesture, every word, every detail. Life doesn't wait. Doors don't open twice. Every moment is a test that never returns. You already know what to do. The only question remaining is, will you allow yourself to disappear, or will you start being seen? If this message resonated with you, if at some point you felt it spoke directly to your life, don't let it slip away. Like this video to reinforce this decision within yourself. Comment even anonymously to show that you're willing to abandon invisibility. And subscribe to the channel to continue receiving the truths no one else has the courage to say, but which can transform your path. The future belongs to those who show themselves. Decide to be one of them now.